This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome, everybody. This is Isabel Melgarejo, your host, and you're listening to A Time to Care the Caregivers podcast. And today with us, we have Tara Jenkins, a board-certified music therapist. And I was about to introduce her as a musical therapist, but she corrected me and said that it was music, not musical. So maybe she can tell us what would be the difference between a music and a musical therapist.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It's so funny because in our community, people get up in arms if they're called a musical therapist. I don't mind. It's just, that's our title, right? We're all musical. But yeah, the title is music therapist. So it is just kind of a funny thing. I mean, I'll answer to anything, music lady, girl with guitar, it doesn't really matter to me. As long as people are excited to see me, that is more important. As a board certified music therapist, we do have 4 years of education. And then we do a 6-month internship. And so that totals about 1,200 clinical hours of training. So we're working with all different age groups in that time period. So kind of like rotations, when you think of nursing or doctors, PT, all that, we do similar things. We call them practicums. And then the 6-month internship, a lot of people focus, on who they might want to work with. So for me, I was in a long-term care community. I knew I wanted to work with older adults. I knew I wanted to work with dementia care. And so that was my 6-month internship. I was full-time as a music therapist in that community. And then after all of that, our education is based in music and medicine and psychology. So lots of different classes on all of those topics. And then we sit for the board exam. And so that board exam is a national credential. So then that gives us the certification MTBC, which is Music Therapist Board Certified. So that's kind of, our education in a snapshot.
I find it so funny because I'm always confusing things. I know that you work with people with Alzheimer's and you also work with caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
Why Alzheimer's? Why caregivers?
With high school, it started where I knew I wanted to do something with music, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, right? So I started researching music majors and narrowed things down, and that's how I discovered music therapy. And then when I was in the program, I took the intro class and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to use music to help people. So that connection was very strong from the beginning of my 4 years at college. And our first practicum was with dementia and Alzheimer's. And I felt a real strong connection to that group of folks. And part of it, I think probably, everybody talks about having a personal story. I think a lot of times when we get into this type of work or working with people, for me, I had a grandmother who had several different diagnoses and was in long-term care. And I always felt like there were ways to reach her, but I didn't know how. I was in high school and I would go to visit and I felt like she was still there and like I could connect with her. And in some moments she was, and other moments were more challenging. And, as I've learned, you never know when you're going to make a connection. And so that's what's so beautiful about music is we all connect to it. We all have different responses to the same song. So, we could play a song, let's just say the Beatles, She Loves You. I'll just use that as an example. And you could have a room of 15 people. Some people may have never heard of it. Some people, it may be a favorite song. Some people, may love the Beatles, but not know the words. There's so many different reactions that are going to happen when you hear that song and those connections. And so that's what's happening when we're listening to music, is our brain is firing until it makes a connection. So with somebody living with dementia and Alzheimer's, even though there might be areas of the brain that are damaged, music is centered throughout our brain. So sometimes you hear those stories where, someone may no longer be able to speak, but they can sing. And again, that's because the speech center may be affected by what they're going through, but there may be other areas of the brain that are kind of working overtime to make those connections so that individual all of a sudden sings. And you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, this is coming out of nowhere. But, there's a lot of science and research to back up why that's the case. And so that was kind of my passion with dementia and Alzheimer's. But when it comes to caregivers, I went through school, I got out, and I worked in the activities department of an assisted living and memory care. That's kind of where I got started. And then I was an activities director at that community. And that's where I really developed the passion to help caregivers, because you just see everything that somebody goes through, from, a loved one getting diagnosed, to that journey progressing and what that looks like, to if they care for them at home versus if they care for they decide it's time to go live in a community, and what that looks like, and all the guilt that is around it, all of the frustration and the overwhelming feelings and all the things that you talk about here on the podcast. I just felt music is another way that it can really help support caregivers. And so when I went back into private practice, one of my goals was to really help caregivers. And so part of that is using music with their loved one. So how can they have a shared meaningful experience, and what might that look like? And then also using music for themselves. So how can they use music for self-care? How can they focus on themselves? Because a lot of times when we're caring for somebody else, that's where our focus is directed. And so we might not be taking the best care of ourselves because we're so focused on making sure that the person we're caring for is taken care of and has everything they need. And so music, again, it's so easily accessible and not a huge cost, for all of us to be able to connect with music in different ways.
So what would be, because obviously music is as diverse, and the ways in which we connect through music, I'm imagining, that are as diverse as the music itself. What would be like ideas for people out there to connect through music and find peace during a period of time?
If they're looking to connect with their loved one, I always say music preferences for both yourself and for your loved one, that is the biggest thing. So if you know your loved one's music preferences, that's a great place to start for meaningful music. If you don't know them, some of the ways that you can explore that is, there's a lot of research that says anywhere from our late teens to early 20s is the music that really stays with us. So you could look at someone's age, and kind of do the math and figure out, okay, in their mid 20s, maybe they were, it was the mid 1960s, or it was the early 1970s. So then what music was popular then? You could also explore, I used to live in Austin, Texas. So country music, there are certain country artists out of Texas that if you grew up in Texas, you may know them, but you may not know them if you like country music now that I'm in North Carolina, right? There, bluegrass is huge out here, and different styles of country. So sometimes looking at someone's background in that way. And then I always say, if they had a music collection, did they have a record collection? Did they have, I still have my book of CDs somewhere. Whatever it is, 8-track tapes, whatever might be around, if they can no longer communicate with you and you're unsure of the music they listen to, that's another way, exploring a music collection and kind of seeing what may have been important to them or what they had. And then I always say the last thing is trial and error. When we're caring for someone with dementia, we're detectives in a lot of ways, in a lot of the things we do, especially as a caregiver. And so that's true with music too. So sometimes, you might say, well, I'm not really sure, but they seem to like rock and roll. So let's start with Elvis. And, Elvis, it's interesting, as I get different ages now, I'm getting folks who love 70s music and 80s music. But when I was having folks who, were in that era of Beatles and Elvis, they were so polarizing at that time. So, people either loved them or they did not like them because they were doing something completely different. So, you kind of try things out. When it comes to music for yourself, you're kind of looking the same way. What music speaks to you? Is there a certain song that no matter when you hear it, it uplifts you or it gives you energy? For me, I always give the example. I love Led Zeppelin's Fool in the Rain. It is a song, no matter when I hear it, no matter how upset or frustrated or whatever's going on, if I hear that song, I am like singing at the top of my lungs. I love that song. And part of it is because I have a connection. My dad used to play his record collection for me when I was younger. So there are lots of different songs that can bring me back to that time and place. So that's just an example of, how you might decide what music to use. And then how you use it can look a lot of different ways too.
So I'm thinking about hobbies, and obviously music is a hobby for probably a lot of people. I played the piano when I was very young and I hated it.
I've heard that. I've also heard from folks too that's like, oh, I had this teacher and they were so strict, or this, or I was told I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, like all sorts of phrases that hurts my heart, but I understand. It hurts my heart that you had that experience, but I understand that that is a common experience for folks sometimes.
I didn't have that experience of people telling me I couldn't carry a tune, or
Mhm.
I just I just didn't enjoy it.
And that's
But
okay
maybe I'll
too.
go back to it
Yeah, yeah.
one
And it's
day.
okay.
So, besides playing an instrument, like what are the things that you would recommend? Like top 3 things you would recommend a caregiver so they have, it could be like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 30, an hour, I don't know. Like just disconnecting, and like what are ways in which people can have self-care through music?
Yeah, so there are so many ways, but when I think of the top 3, one is just listening to it, because that's the easiest, right? You don't feel like you have to do anything. You just put on your favorite music. And so sometimes what I will say to caregivers is if you have a few minutes, start creating your own playlist. Whether that's a list on your phone, whether that's in Spotify or on YouTube. If you have a digital music platform, I really like Spotify because you can download everything and, you can have it on your phone. But whatever your preference is, there's so many out there. I'm not, receiving money for for suggesting Spotify. It's just what I like to use. But I think listening to music, that just gets you, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes maybe you're about to go in to see your loved one to provide care or do something that is challenging. Do something that that usually this is a hard moment or a hard time. Can you take those 3 minutes to listen to a song that's important to you, that energizes you, that maybe calms you down, whatever you need to feel in that moment? A lot of times we can access that through music. So I say that too. If sometimes you might be really angry or you feel like you need to cry, but you can't cry and you just need to like have this emotional release. Music is a way you can tap into those emotions and feelings. So sometimes we might need that release. Maybe it's screaming. Maybe you need to be in your car for 2 minutes or in the garage or wherever your loved one isn't and play the music loud and just like let it out. It doesn't matter what it sounds like. It's about getting, that frustration, those feelings out. So I would say listening to music would be number one. Another way that I think is really beneficial is also matching breathing to music. So there are so many breathing exercises out there. So again, you could look up different ones, or if you go to yoga or if you've done, different practices, you could borrow from that. I really like box breathing because you're just visualizing a box. And so you're exhaling for 4, and then you're breathing in for 4, you're holding for 4, you're exhaling for 4. And so you just continue that. And so you'd want a slower song. You don't want an upbeat song to where you feel like you're breathing too quickly, right? But you can match your breathing to some of those slower songs, some of those preferred songs that you may enjoy. And so that can be helpful. If you really like music, I would say seeing live music can also be very cathartic and be a really powerful experience. And what that could be somebody local, right? It doesn't have to be Willie Nelson or Lady Gaga or, Alanis Morissette or whoever. Those are just who are on my mind right now. But
Yeah,
it
you
can
don't have to spend $1,000 on.
exactly for a ticket. Yeah. And I don't know if you heard that. We all of a sudden got some bad thunder. So if that comes through, I'm good. But I don't know if it's going to come through on the mic. But yeah, you don't have to spend $1,000 for a concert ticket, right? It could be somebody who plays an open mic night or does local music or a cover band or go to YouTube, right? Some people say, well, I don't have the time to go out and spend like the 3 hours or the whatever. So can you find your favorite artist on YouTube and look for live performance? And the reason I like that is because it gets you connected to other people. Even if you're watching a video, you're with others, connecting to music. And so it's more about being in that space and that experience and enjoying like a shared interest with strangers. And there's something I think that can be really powerful about that.
I've never thought about watching a live concert on YouTube.
Yeah. That was something I started suggesting to folks, especially during the pandemic when we couldn't, go out and do that, but also knowing that caregivers' time is so valuable. And sometimes you have the 3 minutes to listen to one song. You don't necessarily have the 2.5, 3 hours to go drive somewhere, find parking, go into the concert, listen for the amount of time, leave, that's a lot of time for someone. So I tried to pare it down. And so that's another way that you can connect. Yeah.
I guess you can be as creative as you can. Like you can
Mhm.
like just connect with a friend. Like let's just watch this video at the same
Of
time.
course. Yeah. Or, let's share. One thing I did when we moved from Austin to Wilmington, North Carolina. And so we had 20 some hours and we were in separate cars. So I was by myself. And so one of the things I did was I put a post on my social media and was like, give me your favorite songs, give me your music recommendations. And so I had all of this music, and some of it I knew, some of it I'd never heard of, some of it I now are some of my favorite songs. And so they were all recommendations from friends and family. And so it was really fun to not only, I felt like I got to know my friends and family a little bit better by what they chose and what they decided to share with me. And then I also got more music for me. So if you don't know where to start, or if you're, some of us, music is not always on throughout our lives. Like for me, music is on if I'm in the car, music is on if I'm cleaning. I have music on if I'm like preparing for something, not everybody's like that, and that's okay. So if you don't know where to start, you could ask family and friends and see what they come up with. And then you can make a playlist from that. You can also, make a playlist of like an energizing playlist to get you motivated for the day. And again, if you look on Spotify, there's so many playlists that are already pre-created. So I say to folks with that too, that's a great place to start. So there might be, you could search happy songs. I don't love just searching by an emotion, but you can do that and it's fine. But if you search happy songs, it's going to have this huge list. So then you pull from that list and then you create your own playlist. So you don't necessarily have to just use what's been formatted in Spotify, but then you can kind of develop your own from that.
I love doing playlists based on activities.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be cleaning bathrooms. What do you
Mhm.
recommend for me to
Yeah.
listen?
I made a joke in one of my like music and self-care presentations that I was like, I created a playlist for doing my taxes because I absolutely hate doing my taxes. So like, what can I have on that like distracts me or motivates me, gets me energized? The same with exercise. There's so much research out there about if you pair movement to music. And so when you're exercising, a lot of times you might find you can go longer. Like you can maybe do more reps, or, you can go a longer distance, even if it's just walking, or running or whatever you're doing. You may find you don't tire as quickly. And that's again, because music, it's motivating. It's also distracting. So it might be distracting us from the thing we don't want to do, but we know it's good for us, when it comes to exercise. So it's another way. And that you can do as a shared experience too. So if you're caring for somebody in the home and you both, walking is good for both of you, but it is sometimes a challenge to get out there and move, can you bring your phone with you or a small portable speaker and even just walk the backyard and have the music on as you're walking, so that it kind of changes what the activity is a little bit.
That's awesome. You mentioned guilt.
Yeah.
And I know this is a huge topic for a lot of caregivers. So, if you feel a lot of guilt, what do you recommend?
So I think when it comes to music, I think another thing that you can do is journal. And so, and just get your thoughts out there. And, some people will tell me, oh, I'm not a writer, or I am not somebody that's in my routine. And so something you might want to do is you could start with music lyrics. So pull up lyrics to a song, and then, it's a term we call lyric analysis, right? You're taking the lyrics, you're analyzing them, and then what do they mean to you? So for the example, I Can Buy Myself Flowers, the song Flowers by Miley Cyrus. That's a really great one to remind yourself what you can still do for yourself. A lot of times we have all of this guilt, or we feel all this pressure or this frustration or whatever it may be, right? And all of those feelings are valid. And all of those feelings are, I don't want to say natural, but they kind of come with when you're caring for someone. It all kind of comes together,
Very
and
human.
yeah, just being human. Yeah. And so I'm thinking of that song as a positive way to spin some of those feelings. So, you know, taking the chorus, and it's, I can buy myself flowers. I forget, I'm going to actually pull it up because I don't want to like get it wrong, but just to give the example of taking a chorus, the beauty of the internet, being able to Google, but it's a write my name in the sand. I knew it was something with sand. Talk to myself for hours, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing. I can hold my own hand, and I can love me better than you can. So you could take that line by line, and what's something you enjoy buying for yourself? Maybe it's a cup of coffee, right? Maybe it's treating yourself to something, a manicure or something like that. What's something that you like to do? So, write your name in the sand, or go for a run, or, spend time with friends, or go on a trip. It really can be anything. And then just taking that line by line, and then that's your journaling. And then maybe from there, you expand on it, and you focus on what that means. And I like using that song as an example because it's also ways that you might self-care for yourself. Using those lines, they might give you insight into, oh, maybe I could do these things every so often for myself to refill my cup, to refill my energy.
Okay. People out there, Miley Cyrus.
Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be that song. It's just that's the one that came to mind for me in the moment. But yeah, you could take the lyrics to any of your favorite songs, and, even just think about why you enjoy it. Is it the rhythm of the song? Is it the melody? Is it the lyrics? And just start writing about that. So I think journaling is big. I think also when it comes to guilt, especially having a community. Who is your community? Who is your support system? And I always ask that of folks. Do you have a support system? Sometimes that's friends and family. Sometimes that's a podcast like this, where you're getting tips and information. Sometimes it's going to a support group, and identifying with others who are going through the same thing. So I think a support system, however that looks, that might be going to Zumba once a week, right? Maybe that's your support system, is you go out and you exercise, you do an exercise class once a week, and that is what you need. Or, what energizes and fuels you, or helps you release some of those emotions and those frustrations. So I think having a support system is huge, especially when caregiving.
I think that has been probably the number one thing that people recommend, having a community. More than anything else is just having a community. I think you're the first one who just refers to the community as a YouTube video. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and for me, I think it's a way that you can feel like you're with other people, right? And you can feel that you're connected. And sometimes too, I always like, and this is probably because of what I do, I love watching how others react to music. That's fascinating to me. I love going to a concert and looking at what's happening to everybody, like people who are dancing, people who are singing, people who, they hold hands or they put their arms around each other when a certain song comes on, or, how they react, to me is really fascinating. And I love doing that. But even if you're not analyzing it at that level, feeling the connection of being a part of something, I think is really important.
I think music is so fascinating because that's probably one of the things that we have as human beings. Probably I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any other animal who creates music. A lot of animals out there communicate with each other, like the
Mhm.
birds sing, dogs bark, the cows moo. Like there's a lot of ways in which other animals out there communicate, but music and having all these instruments, it is very human.
It's interesting to think of it from that perspective. It's so funny. We're in the middle of a tropical storm and we've had frogs singing, like they are loving the rain and the weather. And so, like, thinking about, again, how they're communicating and singing versus how we communicate and sing through music. And one of the things, whether it's us as humans or as animals, and, we're observing the way that they communicate. When we use music, you can communicate with no words. You can communicate with just a melody, with just a rhythm, on a drum. And you can have a conversation with someone drumming back and forth with no words. And there's something really powerful about that. And sometimes, I tell folks with people who are living with dementia and in all stages, even when they no longer can verbally communicate, or if that becomes challenging, they can still express themselves emotionally and creatively through music. And so that might be humming along, that might be playing the drum, that might be, and when I give someone an instrument, I'm getting a lot of information by how they take the instrument. How loud are they playing it? Are they like gripping it? There's so many things in their body language that can communicate to me how they're feeling without them telling me how they're feeling. So, yeah, I think music can be really powerful in that way as well.
For those folks out there who want to work with you and are interested in having 3,000 more ideas that you have regarding music, how can people find you and how do you work with clients? And that would be question number 1. And question number 2, how can people find you?
My private practice is Harmony in Dementia. And so you can, that's my website, it's just www.harmonyindementia. I'm on social media as that as well. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So those are ways you can find me. I also share a lot of free helpful tips and resources throughout the year on ways to use music. So even if you just want to follow along to kind of see what I'm up to and kind of give you ideas, that's a good starting point. If you want to work with me directly, I offer a variety of services. So I work with individuals, so just doing individual music therapy. And what's really great about that is I can tailor a program very specific because I'm working with one person. So, we do an assessment, we develop a treatment plan, and then we work from there. Working with individuals, I do that in person here in the Wilmington, North Carolina area, but I also do it online. So I also do telehealth as well. So if you're not in North Carolina and Wilmington, I can work with you online. What I say about that is everybody living with dementia, they're at a different part of their journey. So sometimes online services may not be appropriate for someone, but I always say, if you think it might be, let's give it a try. That's always my thing. And then we can assess from there. I do group work as well. So I go into the communities and do groups. So I bring instruments and I sing and play guitar and all the things in a community setting. And I do some of those groups online as well. I'm hoping to soon, if you want to follow me in the next month or two, I want to start doing a pay what you can virtual group where people can kind of just come, pay whatever they feel, kind of like a donation based group, and then we can connect together in an online space. So that I'm hoping to launch in the next month or two. You can connect with me online or you connect with me in person, and you can find me on all the things at Harmony in Dementia.
There you have it, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today to the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And for everybody out there, thanks for joining us today, and talk to you next week.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.